Angular best practices. After so why do we have best practices? All of these things. We want the site to be performant. We want to be consistent with our other developers. We want our code to scale well. That's a big thing, what we're doing. We want maintainability and faster PRs. So, my favorite. So here's a lot of principles that I'm probably going to bring up throughout the topic or discussion. So the first one, single responsibility principle. I apologize if this is too Dev or Cody. I wasn't sure who was going to show up here. But, so single responsibility principle, essentially you want every module or component to have only one task and do that one task very well. Don't repeat yourself, rule of three. So you want, when you're coding, you never want to copy paste. Actually, the rule of three is if you have to copy something more than once, 3 times, then turn it into a function or a class or a module, something like that. Separation of concerns, that's essentially, if you don't want to repeat yourself, basically it's a way of structuring your code so that every module is separate and it only has its one single responsibility. And more along the data side, having a single source of truth for data and having it flow in one direction. And I can bring this up more in context later on. So with Angular, there are a number of ways we can make the site more performant. With resolvers, I'm going to try and show code examples here. Let's see it. So we can use something that's called a resolver. I'm trying to, right there. So the file you're looking at right now is essentially every single time you go to a URL, our code matches it to one of these routes. So in our code, we actually have Angular code that runs before a route gets resolved. And that could be to load global variables or content that the page is utilizing, or actual get data from the server and bring it back and actually utilize that within the page. One of the reasons why we use resolvers in Angular is so that you can load the route and you'll have everything that you need for that route. So if I'm loading the home page, I have everything, or actually a better example would be the search page. You know, we already have the search data when we load the search page, so it's not waiting and taking up processing time. So there's 2 schools of thought there. Like, you can either have it all loaded at once, or you can wait until it's done and lazy load it. So in addition to resolvers, we have the template cache. I don't know who's familiar with that. Basically, if we go to our code again, so okay, here's an example of a URL. So we're loading the homepage template right there. The Angular by default, anytime it loads a template, will actually store that for future use. So if you go start on the home page of the website and then you go to the search page and you come back, you're not going to load the home page template over again. One thing we do in addition to that is we can actually tell Angular, hey, why don't you preload all of these templates? So here we have just a file called templatecache.js. We actually can load every single thing that we want to be there by default. So one of the things is if we don't preload all these templates, it interrupts user experience. So like some things chug in at their own time frame. So here we basically, anything that's in the booking flow, we want to load ahead of time. In the future, what we're trying to do is load them modularly. Modularly? Is that a word? Load them in modules, basically. And essentially we'll load different pieces of the app as to not disrupt the user experience. And I'll get more into the user experience a little bit later. Okay. We can talk a little bit about broadcast and emit. Doing my research for this presentation, I found two schools of thought that broadcast was fine because it's optimized. Some backstory on what broadcast and emit is. Essentially in Angular you can create your own events. So one of the ones that I would say that we should have is when the user logs in, that's an event that can happen. And you broadcast saying, okay, the user just logged in or the user just logged out, and then every component on the page can change based off of that information. And then I already talked a little bit about lazy loading. When to use it, when not to use it, that's something that we kind of tweak, and we've been actively tweaking. I know the homepage, thanks to some of the changes that Sandesh and Dan and whoever else I'm not crediting for did, is that we're basically loading some of the, we're preloading the metadata and we're loading some of the content afterwards, and it's creating an overall better user experience.